Well, welcome, Janet, to Unusual Attitudes. Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you.
My first question for you, my opening for everyone, is who is Janet Gipson?
Janet Gipson, for my 1 minute prep on that question, Janet Gipson is a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother. That defines who I am. It defines all of my kind of both passions, my loves, but also my experiences that have defined who I am today. I'd say today, outside of those are roles, the combination of those is someone who is incredibly passionate about people, very interested in people, but somewhat of an introvert. And so it's very directed when I do engage with others. I love creating things. I love leading teams, leading my kids, partnering with my husband, just a relational person, but in a very prescriptive way.
You started off you are clearly a well thought out person. And I pick up on that you started the who is with I'm a daughter. Why did you start with being a daughter first?
That's where it all began, right? My mom and dad are responsible for my formative values, experiences, good and bad, and just the life, how can I put it? The life experiences that really shape who we are. It's foundational, it's fundamental. Some we're trying to work through, some we're leveraging, and others we try to forget. But that's where it all started.
Tell me about your parents. The little bit I know is they were both very accomplished individuals.
Yeah, they're scientists by nature. My dad, educator, science teacher by trade. He, master's in physics and then taught high school and middle school physics. And so I never had the excuse of I don't understand something. And it was funny, my house was the place where people would come over and get tutored or help on a math problem. It was a lot of fun. My mother, 40-year NASA engineer, aerospace engineer, she retired and was she was a human computer, so in the book Hidden Figures, not the movie, but that story that was told about Katherine Johnson, that's my hometown. That was my church on screen. My mother sang in the choir with Katherine, and she stood on the shoulders of them. So science, but also a passion for learning and a competitive spirit that I didn't think I had until I've gotten much older.
That's interesting. How did you realize that you had a competitive spirit? Like, what was the moment you're like, oh, I am competitive?
It's interesting. I mean, I didn't play sports. I was a cheerleader, admittedly, and I did make the team, and I had fun and all of that. But it was, in school, I wanted to be at the top of my class, and I wasn't number one, but I didn't do so bad. I had a teacher, my high school pre-calculus teacher. Whenever you took a test, she after the test, she sat you by grade. So if you got the lowest grade, you were in the front in the left, and the best grade in the back. So everyone knew kind of how you did, and you never wanted to be up front. And maybe that's where I kind of learned how to jockey position, but it stayed with me through life. First, anyone who tells me I can't do something.
Yeah. And you've had a really interesting journey. Let's talk about where you're at now at Yale University. Tell me about your role, and tell me what it's like being in and working with, one of the most prestigious, higher learning organizations in the world.
Yeah. First of all, it's humbling, right? To step on a campus that's over 300 years old, that has bred some of the preeminent politicians, scientists, et cetera, in the world. It humbles you. But it's also, we talked about it, it's a challenge, it's an opportunity to make a lasting impact. We're going through a transformation exercise within the TA space, talent acquisition. And so I have all these emotions and feelings, but the one thing that has grounded me more than anything is the team. An amazing set of individuals who love the university. So the brand is something they live, that they speak, and that they sell to candidates all day. But also their work ethic and the belief that they have in where they work and how that translates to the team. I've been excited to lead them, been there about a year and a half. I have enjoyed the environs. I can go to the museums. I can go to the plays. I can go to the cafeteria. I was taking pictures of the food on my first day. It was that crazy how nice it was, and white tablecloth. Everything is done first class, and it's not pompous. It's just a belief that we are excellence, and this is how you do things as a part of that university. So I was honored to get the call. I am honored to serve, and I'm just looking forward to the impact the team will make.
Well, speaking of your team, if you're looking at it from their lens and maybe offering some advice to individuals out there that are not leaders, they're individual contributors, they're part of teams, right? What is, from their point of view, what should they look for in a good leader that is actually going to invest the time it takes to get to know them as an individual, as a professional, whatever role that is, and really understand that there's a vested interest in helping them? I mean, how do you, from an individual contributor point of view, how do you identify good leadership?
Yeah, it's tough, Cliff. It took me many, many years. Kissed a few frogs. But I think what I would boil it down to is, one, are we value aligned? Number one, first and foremost. I talked about I'm a daughter first. Values were instilled. Those are things that are a part of who Janet is. And I want to work for someone who, isn't counter to those. I'm not saying we have to have the exact same, but we also can't be on opposite ends of the spectrum. So value aligned. Two, they, like me, I look for servant leaders. I don't want, and I would recommend that anyone look for someone who is in service to their team, not self. And then finally, someone who you can learn from and that's going to advocate for you as a part of that learning, right? They're leading you, they're taking you on a journey to find yourself, but also bring results to whatever organization. As you wrap all of that together, though, I would say you have to also understand your role in that leadership, right? A leader can't promote you by themselves. There are, unfortunately or fortunately, political environments that are a part of that decision in terms of your career growth. So you've also got to look at that person as a team member in your career pathing so that you can get where you want to go.
I think it's important to also understand, just what I'm picking up on that, is as a leader myself, I feel like it's my role to promote the great work that my team does to the other leaders in my organization.
Yes.
Because that's the only lens that they're going to see it through. Now, because they're not in the weeds seeing what some of my folks are doing every single day.
That's right.
So my role, I feel like, leaders essentially have two primary roles. And let me see if you agree with this and can expand on it. The first role is obviously to set and meet the organizational objectives of why you have a team to begin with. And that's, I think, would go without saying. But I call that the external role, right? Because that's how you help the organization, the business, grow and scale. But the internal role is very isolated to I have one job, and that is to help my people grow themselves. Yes. Then that's it. And it's actually a very simple goal. It's very hard to execute, right? There's a lot of work involved.
That's right.
How do you do that with your team? If you agree with that is kind of a primary internal goal.
That's right. Well, it two ways. The out is look for opportunity. First, show them the way, right? If they're not at a place where they can deliver on the external results in a way that gives them the stage and the platform, then you coach and teach and learn until they can. Internally, it's a lot of communications. I'm a big fan of one-on-ones. I'm a big fan of having a two-way conversation. I don't prefer the checklist one-on-ones. I prefer this is where I want to be, this is when I want to be there, and I'd love your help. And so we strategize on how to partner to get them there. So I need to know who you are as a human, but also as an employee to be able to align our values and priorities to get there.
Is it easy to separate, going too deep at a personal level with someone and still be able to manage them? I know some leaders find that difficult, and it plays out in how they manage. Sometimes they're a little standoffish, or like, how deep do you like to get?
It's, admission, I've had to lay off some of my best friends and literally cried so it's not easy. But I will tell you that it's the most rewarding when it works. And to me, that you'd say I'm a risk taker, I guess I am, because it's worth it in the end if you can see the results and also have, someone in your network, a good coworker, or even a best friend in that space.
Well, I did label you a risk taker because if you look at your career path, again, I don't do a whole lot of homework before we have these conversations, but the way I would describe your career path is climbing a rock wall. That you're moving in different directions, always moving up, sometimes maybe slight lateral, but always moving up and climbing that wall. And it gets harder and harder the higher you climb and the different directions you take. Tell people about your journey. Like, it is very unusual.
It is. So parents, scientists, needed to go into science. It wasn't my passion, but it was something I could do, so I did it. Thankfully, it opened doors that may not have otherwise been open. I did not enjoy working as just a core engineer.
You were dual degree, right?
I was dual degree in mathematics and mechanical engineering.
Right. And so your first role outside of university was mechanical engineering?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I worked at Newport News Shipbuilding in Newport News, Virginia, as a valve engineer, whatever that is. So nuclear aircraft carriers have to go through overhauls every so few years, and I worked on CVN 68 class aircraft carriers, and so I was responsible for this valve and the maintenance on that valve, and wrote all the instructions so that when it came in, they knew what to do. Not exciting at all.
But important work nonetheless.
Well, yes, it's very important.
Yeah.
I'm not minimizing it, but it just wasn't for me.
Right.
So anyway, worked as an engineer both for that and then the Army in a stint, and just realized I can't do this for 30 years. So I went back to grad school with the hopes that the MBA would broaden my lens for what's out there and what's available. Engineer, I went in and did all the math and the science, so I didn't get a lot of humanities or just a lot of the business rigor that I really enjoyed in graduate school. Was very particular about what role I took after that, and so I found, with the help of a career coach, a sales engineering role at Dish Network. And that's where I would say my love for the technology, love for people, leading. First time I had a team, that role was really what gave me the foundation for where I am today in terms of my passions and what I really like to do in a role. I'm not, like you said, it's not scripted, but the work I did with that career coach, coupled with just self-awareness, I listened to my gut. I listened to my, academic training and tried to design a next step that is true to both or all. So anyway, took that job, and the rest was history. I was able to build a team, revenue. I loved the sales dance, account management, loved solutioning for people. I got to meet tons of people, both on my team, but also in the client spectrum that I worked with, that are still friends to this day. But after that, then you get enough of chasing the bottom right-hand revenue corner. And so after about 15, 16 years of that, interestingly, Dish opened up a brand new VP of TA, and I was VP of Sales and Marketing. And I was talking to my coach at the time, and we had been doing work, value, you know the drill, value alignment, what does your perfect role look like, blah, blah, blah. And I would say 80% of what I listed was in that role. And I interestingly talked to someone who was in HR at the time, and I said, you know what? I'm thinking about applying for this role. What do you think? You know what they said? They said they'll never hire you because you have zero background in HR. Forget it. That's all I needed to hear.
That was a challenge. See, here comes the competitive
I'm telling
Janet,
you,
right?
well, and yes, so more self-awareness. But anyway, I applied for it. And, you know, my pitch was, I'm no slouch because I've got an engineering degree. So I can learn almost anything you throw at me, even recruiting, right? But I'm a leader. Everyone's not a leader. I love operations and solving problems, which this role would also be. But ultimately, I understand how to sell to clients and that solutioning. And TA at the time, this was 2018, so pre-COVID, but it was shifting to more of that acquisition model, sales funnel. And I said, you're going to need skills like that. And then I've been at this company for 18 years. Who else better to sell the brand than someone who knows it and understands it? Luckily, they bought it. Sales, my sales background worked. But anyway, that was when I knew. When I got that role, I had found my home. And I've had the opportunity to, this is now my third role of kind of transforming teams and building a capable, and I'm going to say pivoting TA teams from that transactional mindset to know you have to treat candidates and hiring managers like clients, and here's how you influence, sell, and ultimately deliver for the organization.
So just that journey is wildly different than sort of a traditional path. And it suits your personality. But hone in on the risk-taking piece, because I think that is one of the things that I see when I talk to people who are sticking with a traditional journey, a traditional path, because they don't understand the value in risk-taking, even calculated risk-taking. It sounds like you were very calculated in how you approach this. How would you explain this to someone, especially someone coming into their professional career, coming out of high school, coming out of university, some trade or whatever, you know, how valuable a risk-taking mindset, calculated risk-taking mindset is?
It's a muscle we should all build, but the pre-step to that risk-taking is working through the fear. And we don't teach enough of how to work through our own internal inhibitions, fear, and I would say that is what will open doors for you, because you don't allow that to inhibit your desires, your growth interest, etc. Fear is a tough one, and I'm sitting here thinking about an experience. I am a triathlete, and I say that very gingerly because I did not finish. I D&Q'd my first triathlon. Long story short, this was 2013, 14, so almost 10 years ago. I signed up for this, you know how they do the couch to 5K? It was kind of a couch to sprint triathlon. And anyway, we did quick training, loved the team, loved the group. We did biking, we did, of course we did running. We only did open water swimming once. It was a quick Sunday morning, dip in the reservoir, come on out, wear your suit, now you get it. No. That morning of that race, my husband's got pictures, he's a photographer, of looking at this crowd of people running into the reservoir. There are monsters at the bottom of the reservoir. But anyway, I panicked and took the little jet ski when people are hyperventilating and having panic attacks. Yeah, I was one of them. And that experience and what happened after that, I think, is where I both understood how limiting fear can be, and especially if it prevents you from accessing the best of who you are. And so I'm a puzzle problem solver. I'm like, okay, there were hundreds of other people who did it, and I froze, and a couple of teammates of mine. What is different, and what do I need to do to get there? So I got a coach who kind of helped me understand it's also mental, but you can do this, and here's how you do it. And I came back 3 months later, and I did it, and I finished. But that, in my opinion, as I think back during this conversation, was the pivotal moment, because I proved to myself that I could work through the fear. I'm an engineer, so the steps need to be clear for me. It's not always emotional, but I can work through it, and if I do, I am building a capability and a muscle that helps me then go after the next thing. And it doesn't get easier, but I understand the prescription to get there now.
And then was something I picked up on just what you said, and I think is really important for people to understand at any age, anywhere, right? Which is, you asked for help.
Yes.
Like, why?
Yes.
Why is that so important?
We are designed to interact and be social with others, connect with others, learn from others, get support from others, right? I didn't always think like that, I have to tell you, especially early in career. It was about what can Janet do, but you get to a place where you don't have options. And I would probably say it's through getting a good coach that I realized how helpful they can be. So as much as people think they can go it alone, you need people in your network. Some call it that executive board, some, whatever your network is, however you choose to call it, that having access to that and the resources associated with that are like it's a multiplier, it's a force multiplier in terms of what you can accomplish, right? So.
I talk about that often, my own journey. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I just celebrated 10 years of sobriety a week ago. Thank you. And like, even in that journey for me, like, I knew that there was no way I could get sober without help. But what I've learned from that was I call him my spiritual advisor, is with me a decade later, and we talk often. And I have come to rely on that relationship because he, for me, brings things that I don't see in myself. And to me, mentorship is a lot about that, helping you recognize who you actually are. Because when we look in the mirror, we are biased. Yeah. It's inherent. We can't not be. We have our line of sight about ourselves is very limited. If you surround yourself, your personal executive board, I call them my advisors. I have a spiritual advisor, I've got business advisor, I've got a pilot advisor for my flying. I have all these really wonderful people around me, and I also sit on other people's personal boards. Yeah. And is this just wonderful community that I can and have come to rely on, this really authentic feedback with people I know have my best interest. How do you know when they have your best interest? Like that at some point, the instinct has to kick in. You have to build that muscle. But how do you know?
You don't always know. But you have to work through that. You will fine tune the skills, the radar to recognize through trial and error that person is in your corner. It takes building trust and continuing to check in with yourself, both physically and emotionally, about the feedback you're receiving. Does it resonate with you? And if so, why? If not, why? And then continuing to evolve. The coaches that I had 20 years ago were great friends, but are probably not the coaches I need today because I need something different. And I would say, know that it's not a set it and forget it relationship, but it's something that you should continue to evaluate and understand. I believe that we all need it. And to your point, the mirror we look in, we have self-talk that isn't always kind. We are not our best advocates in many cases. And there's a lot of, we talk about foundation, talking about being a daughter, all of those different voices are in your head, but externally people are able to see more of what the true you is and help you color in those lines a bit more accurately.
Yeah. And that's also an important lesson, and I think it's worth repeating, which is if you build this network around you, you can change it. Yes. And you probably should change it because, and those mentors, those advisors, your executive board would also understand that. It's not like you don't maintain friendships, yes. But some people are going to come and go based on the season, based on the time in your life and where you're at, and you may need something different. All that plays into how do you manage your own ego through that? Because that can be difficult. You have to have a sense of vulnerability, and that you talk about trust and you talk about faith. Talk to me about quieting your own ego, because my ego is loud. I mean, there are times when it's screaming at me to go get some attention. And what I've learned now, I am in my early 50s, but I have learned to really quiet that ego. But if I look back to your example, if I look back 20 years ago, that ego controlled me. Like literally everything I did.
That's very interesting. I think it depends. I've never had an ego per se. My journey was more about my coaches, my mentors seeing the best in me and helping me believe that. I don't know that I'll ever get to a place where I have that super ego. Now, I have been coached to do or maybe venture in ways that I didn't align with. And in those moments, it was checking in with who I am, making sure I am quietly identifying those things that are priorities and most important to me, and then leading from that place, not a place of that's what they said, or even if my ego shows up, that's what the ego says I should do. It's got to feel right. One of my coaches, I was talking about anxious feelings, and she says, well, where are you feeling it? Well, it's in my gut. Well, you need to sit with that and understand what that is before you make any decisions. What is it in this moment that is creating that unrest, and settle that. So I think it all goes back to recognizing. You recognize in yourself, I recognize in myself what my tendencies are. And once you do that, you balance it with the right support system to breed the best of who you are. So.
I think one of the things, I use the words, or somebody had used the words, how do you make people feel safe and comfortable? And I had to have them contextualize that for me, because they're safe. There's a physical and mental safety that we always want people to have. Like, you should never feel like you are in an unsafe physical or mental environment, because that's unhealthy. If that exists, the other definition of safe and comfortable is, in your role, the work that you're doing. There I would disagree. And let me ask you that, if you agree or disagree. And I disagree because what you just said in terms of finding the uncomfortable part, because that's where growth comes from. I don't want people to feel safe or comfortable only in that context, right? I want to find those points where you're feeling uncomfortable, you're feeling unsafe because you're unsure of your footing to make a decision, or attacking that fear. How do you help someone get over, if it's not ego? It is for a lot of people, but for many it's not. But the safe and comfortable is a bit challenging, because we understand the physical mental aspect of it, but how do you grow if you don't explore the uncomfortable?
I go through this with new leaders on my team, or people who are promoted who've either had small teams or never worked for me, because I love to challenge. But first and foremost, knowing who you are and what motivates you. Like, I want to get to know you, and then I want to challenge you, maybe indirectly, in ways that will kind of put you out further than you've been before, in a space where you're uncomfortable. And I think patience as a leader is incredibly helpful, right? Giving people the space to either make mistakes or struggle or get frustrated with you. If I've done my job right in terms of who's promoted, they will understand the lessons that are being presented to them. They will color in the lines for themselves, and then they'll come back and say, right? I don't always get that right, but I think that you're right in that you don't want people to get stagnant on your team, and you want to push them ever so gently, not outside their own emotional boundaries, but enough so that they can see and believe that they can rise to that occasion and will grow as a part of that. So.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave off.
Okay.
Janet, thank you for sharing your unusual attitude.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.